World War II, the name itself, it really evokes images. Images of unprecedented destruction, of suffering on a scale that honestly the world had never seen, and hoped never to see again. It was a global maelstrom, a firestorm that consumed nations. Millions upon millions perished, soldiers and civilians alike. Cities turned to smoldering ruins, ancient cultures faced annihilation. The very fabric of society was torn asunder violently. No continent was truly spared. Its dark shadow touched everyone. The war redrew maps. It toppled empires old and new. It gave birth to new powers and new, terrifying weapons. The world order shifted. Balance of power reconfigured. Humanity itself seemed to hang precariously in the balance. This was more than battles, more than strategies or generals. It was a crucible of humanity, testing courage, resilience, and cruelty, a defining moment of an era. Its echoes resonate still today. Why did such a horror happen? The answers are complex, painful. The First World War ended. They called it the war to end all wars, a hopeful yet naive sentiment. Peace arrived in 1919, but it was a troubled peace, sealed by the Treaty of Versailles, a treaty that many Germans saw as a deep humiliation. Germany lost vast territories, its colonies were stripped away, its military was severely restricted. No air force, a tiny navy, a small army for defense only. And then came the reparations, billions to be paid for war damages, a burden that crippled its economy. This treaty bred resentment, a simmering anger within Germany. A feeling of injustice festered. Many Germans felt betrayed. Stabbed in the back, they said. The Weimar Republic, the new government, was forever tainted by association with this harsh, imposed peace. The seeds of future conflict were sown in Versailles' grand halls. The desire for revenge grew, the longing to restore lost pride, to tear up the dictated terms. This bitterness provided fertile ground for extremist voices to rise, promising a different, stronger future. The 1920s had roared for some, a decade of jazz and optimism. But it ended with a crash. Wall Street, October 1929. The stock market collapsed. Panic spread like wildfire. The Great Depression began. Its icy grip tightened worldwide. Banks failed by the thousands. Businesses shut their doors. Factories fell silent, cold. Unemployment soared to new heights. People lost their jobs, their savings, their homes, their very dignity. Lines for bread and soup grew long. Despair became a common companion. This economic devastation was not confined to America. It was a global pandemic of poverty. Germany, already burdened by reparations, was hit exceptionally hard. Hyperinflation had earlier destroyed savings. Now, mass unemployment returned. The fragile democracy faltered. In these desperate times, people searched for answers, for anyone offering a solution or even just a scapegoat. Democratic governments seemed helpless, unable to stop the suffering. The appeal of strong leaders grew, leaders promising radical change. Democracy seemed to be failing in many parts of the world. Amidst chaos and economic ruin, people yearned for stability, for strong leadership, for order. This yearning opened the door to men who promised just that, often through force and tyranny. In Germany, Adolf Hitler rose. His Nazi party offered scapegoats, Jews, communists, the Versailles Treaty. He promised to restore German pride, to rebuild the nation's strength, to create a new empire. His fiery speeches captivated many, desperate for hope, any hope. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had already seized power earlier. His fascist movement promised glory, a revival of Roman greatness. He crushed opposition ruthlessly. He spoke of discipline, of empire. His black shirts marched with arrogance, a model for other aspiring dictators. In Japan, the military gained influence. Generals and admirals saw expansion as the only path to resources and national survival, they claimed. They pushed for a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, dominated by Japan, of course. These regimes glorified war and dismissed individual freedoms. The memories of World War I were still fresh, still raw. The slaughter, the mud, the futility, these things haunted everyone. Nations like Britain and France were desperate to avoid another such devastating, bloody conflict. Peace, at almost any price, that became their guiding principle. This policy became known as appeasement, giving aggressive leaders some of what they wanted, hoping it would satisfy them, hoping it would prevent war. When Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland against the Versailles Treaty, the Allies did little but protest. A missed opportunity, some say. Then came Austria's annexation, followed by demands on Czechoslovakia. The Sudetenland, a region with many Germans, became the next target. At Munich in 1938, Britain and France agreed. They pressured Czechoslovakia to yield. Neville Chamberlain returned to Britain proclaiming, "Peace for our time." But appeasement was a failure. It did not satisfy Hitler, it only whetted his appetite. It showed him the democracies were unwilling to fight. He saw it as weakness, a green light for further aggression. The price of peace kept rising. The dictators shared common goals. They despised democracy and communism. They craved more territory, more power, more resources. Adolf Hitler spoke of Lebensraum, living space for the German people. He looked eastward, towards Poland and the vast lands of Russia. Benito Mussolini dreamed of empire, a new Roman dominion. He invaded Ethiopia in 1935, a brutal, unequal conquest. The League of Nations protested, but its sanctions were ineffective. Italy drew closer to Germany, finding common cause in aggression. Japan, meanwhile, pushed into Asia. It had invaded Manchuria in 1931, creating a puppet state, Manchukuo. Then, a full-scale invasion of China in 1937, marked by atrocities like the rape of Nanking. Japan sought oil, rubber, metals, to fuel its growing war machine. These three powers began to align. Germany and Italy formed the Rome-Berlin axis. Later, Japan joined them, creating the Tripartite Pact. The Axis powers were united by their expansionist ambitions and their opposition to the existing world order. They were ready to take what they wanted. Hitler's gaze turned to Poland. He demanded the return of Danzig, a port city with German heritage, and access through the Polish corridor, land that separated parts of Germany. Poland, backed by new guarantees from Britain and France, refused. Tensions reached a breaking point. On September 1, 1939 at dawn, German forces struck. The invasion of Poland began. Panzer divisions smashed through defenses. The Luftwaffe bombed cities. It was a new kind of warfare, blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Swift, brutal, and overwhelming. 2 days later, on September 3rd, Britain and France honored their pledge. They declared war on Germany. The Second World War had begun, in Europe, at least for now. But the conflict would not stay contained. It was destined to spread across the oceans, across the globe. The Soviet Union, surprisingly, had signed a non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany just weeks before, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. It secretly divided Poland and Eastern Europe between them. Stalin, too, had ambitions. The world watched in horror. The invasion of Poland was the spark, the immediate trigger for the war. But the causes ran much deeper, like roots of a poisonous tree. They had grown for many years, nourished by past grievances and present-day desperation, a complex web of factors. The unresolved anger from World War I, especially Germany's humiliation at Versailles, created a thirst for retribution. The failure of the League of Nations to maintain peace and collective security showed its inherent weakness. Powerful nations ignored its mandates. Aggression went largely unchecked. The devastating Great Depression caused worldwide economic hardship. It fueled political extremism and made populations vulnerable to the promises of dictators, who offered simple solutions and scapegoats for their suffering. Nationalism, intense and aggressive, surged. The expansionist ambitions of totalitarian regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan were a direct driving force. These regimes glorified militarism and sought to dominate their regions. The policy of appeasement by Britain and France, however well-intentioned, only emboldened these aggressors. World War II ended in 1945, leaving behind a scarred planet and tens of millions dead. The scale of its horror forced the world to confront the darkest aspects of humanity, but also its capacity for courage and resilience in the face of evil. From its ashes we learned hard lessons. The danger of unchecked aggression cannot be ignored or appeased away. It must be confronted with strength and with collective resolve. Economic instability and despair can create fertile ground for conflict. Prosperity and justice are linked to peace. The importance of international cooperation became clearer than ever before. The United Nations was formed, hoping to succeed where the League failed, to provide a forum for dialogue and a means for collective action, to prevent future global wars. Human rights were recognized as universal. The echoes of that terrible war still resonate in our world today. We must remember its causes, its devastating consequences, the sacrifices made by so many. To understand is to be forewarned so that history's darkest chapters are never ever repeated, lest we forget.